action. So we are talking about local social capital. And as I've explained, by that I mean the social capital that derives from your immediate ties, as opposed to the social capital that derives from your position in the network, such as centrality. So there are certain networks where you are in a certain location and you are that nexus between all this stuff over here and all that stuff over here. You don't know all those people, and yet because of your position, you get certain benefits, or you're in a position to have an influence on the network. This is different. This is more local. So the oldest, probably most obvious version of this is what's called social resource theory, SRT. And actually, there's an older tradition too, which is called social support theory. Social support occurs in social work literature, and it's about the fact that some people have more social support than others, and so a number of things go well for them. Social resource theory is kind of just an elaboration of that. One of the differences between social resource theory and social support is that in social support, there's no tradition of actually collecting network data. You ask people questions like, how well connected are you to your community? How many friends do you have? You don't actually list the people that are in their world. In social resource theory, you do. And so it's typically an egocentric kind of thing where you ask people about all the people in their lives, and then what are the kinds of ties do you have with them, and then what kinds of benefits do they bring to you, and so on. So the basic view here is that we're trying to find out who you're connected to and what they can do for you. What is the benefit of those people? And the notion, of course, is that person's an island, you can use the resources of others in order to accomplish things, almost as if they were your own. In a way, it's sort of like the idea that you can borrow other people's social capital. Because I don't have to have the power, I just need to be connected to somebody who does have the power. So let's have a look at how you would actually calculate something like that. And a typical measure would be this equation here, which is just a simple sum. So let's parse it. Not everybody spends all their time looking at equations. So W is a matrix, and it indicates the extent to which I has a hold on J, like they're close friends, or J is dependent on I, but somehow I has a hold on J. So W sub ij is the extent to which I can rely on J for help. R sub J is a quality of person J. It's something like the amount of disposable income they have, or the amount of time that they've got to play with your projects. Something of use. It could be the amount of computer knowledge that they've got. And we're going to sum up across the entire set of alters in the study their resources. So let's think of Wij as 1 and 0. Either I'm friends with them or not. If it's 0, then this product is 0. It's nothing. So whenever it's a 1, whenever it's a friend of yours, we sum up the resource of that person. So the social capital for you, person I, is the sum of the resources of your friends. That's all that says. Any problem with understanding that equation? And I mean the equation part of it. I know you get the principle, but I want to make sure that you can read subscripts. Nobody wants me to redo that. Okay. Fine. And then if W sub ij were valued, it would just be a strength of tie, right? So it would be, you get a high value if you have strong ties to many people who have high resources. Now, we could compute this very easily. Suppose you didn't do this in UCINet. I mean, you were poor, for example, and you didn't have UCINet. But you did have some other product. How could you do that? Yeah, I mean, you could do it's that is actually the definition of matrix multiplication, where you've got a matrix multiplied by a column vector. You could do that in Excel. You could do it by hand. It's not a problem. All right. Yes. Yeah, so that would be interesting. So if you did have negative ties, it would actually subtract. So it's like that person's got a lot of resources, but I have a negative tie to them, and we're going to subtract that from my sum. And the assumption would have to be that they would use those resources to take away from your ability to get things done. That would be the only way in which it would make sense to include negative ties there. Probably more usefully, you might separate the positive and the negative ties and do this separately for the two of them and get a sum of kind of your position with respect to the positives and your position with respect to the negatives. Now this gets you the sort of the sum of the total amount of resources that your friends have. That's usually the right way to go. But sometimes, as we pointed out before, class, in fact, you might want to use the maximum instead of the sum. You don't need 3 computer experts. You just need 1 to fix your computer. So what you need is to have a strong tie, a big Wij, with a person J that has a lot of computer knowledge. And so this is just, we're just going to take the maximum across all of your friends, pick the one that's the largest, and then you go to that person for help. Now, how would we do this in UCINet? Well, I will tell you. I will start UCINet. In this century, yes. We are recording, yes. And I think that should be the sign of it right there. Yes, recording. So we could go to network, ego networks, and then EgoNet composition and continuous alter attributes. So I'm going to pick a data set that we don't use normally. DBCoNet. I don't know if we've all got it. So let's actually pause to collect that data and put it in one place to make sure that we've all got it. So you should have an Excel file in this folder, your UCINet data folder. It's the one that's under documents and it says UCINet data. There should be an Excel file called something about learning data for learning UCINet. So I'm going to go to that folder right now. And I think I will sort based on type. And I will find an Excel file. There we go. Data for learning UCINet. Sorry, can't do this. It's already open. That's fine. I don't care. It is open. So notice that it's got a tab. Well, let me first wait to make sure that everybody's got there. Does everybody who has their computer open, have they gotten there? I will wait a moment. Yeah. And for those of you that will be TAing for people, it is a confusing part when an instructor suddenly says, "Okay, we're not doing UCINet now. We're going to go to We're going to go to Excel." A little transition moment there. Well, one of the tabs in this data set is DBCo Discussion Network, and these are data that were given to me by Ron Burt. And DBCo is short for Oracle. He collected these data at Oracle, and they're anonymized, so the people are just numbers. And I'm just going to grab the first two columns and copy them to the clipboard. So Control C. And then start UCINet. And I'm going to put these into the DL editor, which is the fourth from the right. And I paste it. And there's two things that I have to remember. The first one is I have to select the format. I have to say, this is an edge list. Why is it an edge list? Because each row is a different tie. And an edge is just another word for tie. And the other thing is I have to tell it that from and to are not nodes. Those are just column headings. I click column headings. Now it will ignore the first two. And then I press save. And I'm going to call this dbconet. And there it is. It's got zeros, it's got ones. It looks like a normal network. I'm going to close this window. I'm going to do some stats on it just to make sure I understand it. So if I go to Tools and then choose Univariate Statistics, that will give me some basic stats on the whole matrix. The input data set is dbconet. And the options, it says, what do you want me to analyze? The rows, the columns, the levels. We want to do the levels. We want to analyze the entire matrix all at once. And so it gives us a bunch of stats, like there were 1,009 pairs of nodes. There were no missing values. There were only zeros and ones. And the average value for the whole matrix is 0.009. What's another word for that particular average? What does the average mean? What do we call that? We call it density. Exactly. So that is the density of the network. And for a network that has like 300 people in it, that's a pretty normal density. So most networks are very dense. They're almost all zeros. Okay. So let's close this. And now let's go back to our Excel file. And somewhere else here, there's a tab called dbco node attributes. So let's grab that. And I'm going to highlight everything. Control C to copy it to the clipboard. Then I go back to UCINet. I go to the DL editor. I wipe away what was there by pressing the little plus sign. I don't think I can paste when it's blue. Just learn this. I feel like a rat learning the rules. If you go here, you get shocked. If it's blue, you can't do it. So I've saved it there. This is not an ego list. This is, I go upwards, it's a matrix. The first row is column labels, that's correct. The first column is row labels, that's correct. This is looking good, so I'm going to save this as dbco attr. That's my personal code. There's net and attr for networks and attributes. Right, so we've got some variables like compensation of each person, what their last evaluation was by their manager for promotion, whether or not they are an individual contributor and what rank they are within that, whether or not they are a manager and what rank they are within managerial ranks, how old they are, whether they're female, whether they're in sales, how many years of seniority, whether they're in the Singapore office, whether they were part of some training program that was going on, and I have no idea what B satellite is. Doesn't even say over here. It's just a mysterious variable that Ron Burt puts in to make everything come out right. I don't know. You could remind me not to say stuff like that when it's being recorded. All right. So we now have a data set to play with, and we've totally forgotten what we were doing. But suddenly I'm remembering that we're playing with social capital. We're trying to work out something like the total number of resources that somebody has available. I don't know what a resource is here, but maybe it's a resource to you if you have ties to somebody who is a high-ranking manager. So I'm going to do that. I just wanted to see over here under manager, rank of manager, 4 levels. It doesn't say like is a 1 higher or a 4 higher. I'm going to assume that the 4 is higher. So I go to network, I go to ego networks, I go to EgoNet composition, I go to continuous alter attributes. My network is DB, and my attributes are going to be found in dbco_attr. And then the only question is, what resource of my friends do I care about? It could be the number of women. The more women I have, the more the advantage I have of a female perspective. But no, I'm going to choose MGR, and I'm going to leave all else alone and just say OK. And now, for each person in the network, and let's check how many that is. It's 331 people in this network. The average of their friends' managerial scores for person 1 is 1.25. If you notice, person 2 has a higher average. If we look at the minimum and maximum, like I'm not too sure about the sum here. I guess the sum is meaningful. The minimum is interesting. Person 1 has friends with people who are not even managers. They are 0 on the managerial level scale. They also have some friends who are at the absolute highest manager level, level 4. The average is 1.25, so mostly they've got them on the low end. The standard deviation is what it is. It's pretty high. And they've got 8 friends. And the next person there has only 5 friends, but they're sort of better chosen in a sense. The minimum is a 2, the high is a 4, the standard deviation is lower than the other person. They're just generally, their friends are just higher, more selective. And so I'm predicting that person 2 is advantaged by that it's better to have friends in high places. Here's a person who has only 1 friend. That friend is a 4. That's very selective. I only know 4s, right? But they only know one of them, so that's a little tricky. So in a way, if you look at their sum now, their sum is only 8, but the sum of person 4 here is 42. They know all kinds of people from 0s to 4, but taken together, their little personal network has more in it than the one person who's concentrated in that 1, 4. Everybody understanding the output? Okay. Now, if it's true that it's helpful to have friends in high places, this should correlate with something. It ought to correlate with something like their supervisor's evaluation. So let's see if it's true. I'm going to do a simple correlation. I'm going to close this. I'm going to remember, by the way, that this output data set, it says right here, is dbconet-ego strength. Odd name, but that's what it is. So we're just going to remember that. And now I'm going to go to the CLI to show you a very cool kind of correlation. I'm going to display the correlation between dbco attr and dbco net dash ego strength. And those are parentheses, even though they don't look like it. I know that my TA, Jin Miao, is in her office right now wearing a full winter down jacket that goes from top all the way to below the knees. Okay, so let's try that. See if I typed it right. No. I see. Okay. And you'd think there'd be a correct, but no. So I'm going to press the up arrow to give me the line back again. And then I'm going to type strength correctly. Now, notice that unlike any statistical package, such as Stata, which costs hundreds, it doesn't give you the full correlation matrix of every variable with every other variable, because we didn't need that. We really were more interested in how attributes of the people were related to some of their network attributes. So it only showed us those correlations. And Z eval here is the one I find most interesting, so I would like to know if, and there's nothing much there. So, you know, these correlations are incredibly low. Maybe if I control for a whole bunch of other stuff, we might find the maximum might be somewhat correlated with the manager's evaluation, but boy, there's not a lot there. Now, knowing a lot of people who are high in management is actually highly correlated with age, 0.349. I'll bet that's significant. It's not correlated with being female. So men tend to have more high-ranking friends in the organization. Now, of course, this is just correlation. It's got no significance and stuff, so we could really run a regression. We should probably run a regression. Now, frankly, regression is easier to do outside of UCINet. But I'll show you how to do it anyway. Pain in the ass, although it may be. That's true. So technically it's better, but it's just not as convenient to do it. Also, these days with Stata and having bootstrapped confidence intervals and robust standard errors, the differences are very small. And I find that when I run them against each other, I rarely get anything that's much different. It is true that I can artificially, because I know how it works, I can construct a data set that will screw up the classical test and will be fine in UCINet. But it's really hard to do that. But you're right. So I'm going to grab one variable out of all of these. Let's see. I'm going to grab I'll just do it the painful way. Okay, here we go. So we go to Tools. Be ready for your pain. The first pain is having to go through an awful lot of menu choices. Testing hypotheses, node level, regression, the data set containing the dependent variable. Well, that's the one that has the manager's evaluation. So that's dbco attr. And then it says, well, which column did you want? And I'm going to choose evaluation. And then it says, well, what about the independent variables? Well, actually, there's dbco net dash ego spelled correctly. And I don't think the average is really the right one. I think it's the sum, and then I'll press add to bring it down here. And I think also maybe the max. And I'll bring that down here. So right now I'm saying I'm building a model. I'm going to predict manager's evaluation as a function of how many friends the manager has that are in high places, and also what's the highest level of any of his friends. Although probably it's going to be a 4 for everybody, so that may wash out. And maybe I should have control variables too. So actually I'm going to bring in here, I'm going to go back to dbco attr, and you can see why this is a little bit of a pain in UCINet compared to SATA, where all the variables are in one file instead of multiple files. Here, no, we don't. We don't, no. But we might feel that, you know what, this is hardly a random sample. And we might, it's not a small sample, but it's not random. And, you know, anything involving income and those kinds of performance variables are often not normally distributed. It's like a few people get the high ratings and a lot of people get the low ratings. So we can at least take care of those issues. But you're quite right. I would feel very comfortable doing this in ordinary regression. Having said all that, I'm going to grab whether the person is an individual contributor. I'm going to grab whether they're female. I'm going to grab whether they are in sales, whether they're in the Singapore office. And I'll just leave it at that. And then I'm going to run it. Everybody says, so we've got a minimal R-square. We're not predicting a lot. We've got several coefficients here. Let's see which ones are significant. Well, guess what? Nothing is significant. Nothing predicts managers or supervisors' evaluation of these variables. The only thing that comes even close is the sum. It's the total number of managers that you're connected to weighted by how high they are. The truth is that it may have nothing to do with how high they are. It may be just having a large network. So I'm actually going to run this one more time. And here I can press Alt backspace. Or you know what? There's a list of the previous commands that you've been running up here. You could always just find regression and go back to that. Weirdly, I'll bet you no one has ever noticed that little edit window there. It just did not exist for you. But it's there. It's always been there. And I'm going to put in, I got to change data sets here. I'm going to clear all this crap. dbco attribute, well, let me put in a few things back. I'll put in age, I'll put in fem, I'll put in sales, seniority. But then I'm going to change the data set here to dbco net ego strength. Bring in num. Num was just the number of friends the person had, unweighted by anything. Just how many people do they connected to. And let's see what happens. I didn't add it. Oops. So I have to run it again. I can do Alt backspace to run it again. Num. Okay, now I have added it. And then I run it. And I got C. Num is actually significant. Now notice there's two significance columns. One is C.sig. That's the classical test. That result will be exactly what Stata gives you, right down to the last decimal place. P.sig is permutation. So it's using its super fancy, very time-consuming method of calculating significance, and you can see that there's virtually no difference. Because actually these data conform to the conditions of a classical test. So they get the same answers. It's only when they're wildly discrepant from, you're really doing something weird that does not fit the classical test, would you get a difference. But it does show you here that the network variable makes a difference. But we got too fancy in talking about, well, it's important to have friends who are high managers. Actually, it was just the number of friends you had. And it may not even be, what do you suppose the model is there? Why is it that the number of friends you have, and I should define exactly what friends means. He calls it a discussion network. I think it's who you discuss important work matters. That's what friends is. And what we have just found is that number of contacts, shall we say, predicts supervisor evaluation, which is basically it's their rating of whether or not the person is promotable. Why would we find controlling for everything? Yes. Yep. So the people who have more ties are evaluated more highly by their supervisors. Okay. Theory one. The supervisor has more info. Is that what you mean? Or the manager? Person with a high evaluation gets more information. So they perform it. Oh, okay. So the manager being evaluated, manager has more info, performs better. And so implicitly in here is that the number of contacts is creating, I don't know, human capital, more knowledge, more, yeah, that's an interesting one. So actually, let's separate them. So more knowledge, more information, which in turn gives better performance, which in turn gives a better evaluation. But then you just added, it may not be just knowledge, it could also be support. Like you're actually getting friends to help you do your job. Okay. Yeah. So, in fact, the way I would put it is that what we're writing here, what this box is called, social capital. Although it's a confusing thing, nobody knows how to define social capital. In the reading for today, I don't know if you read all the people who have different definitions of social capital, but they're so confused as to whether social capital is like the number of ties that you have, or it's what the number of ties bring you, or it's whether or not you actually become successful as a result of your social ties. It's completely confused. But yeah, basically, social capital is somehow in here, and it's just specific names for what it brings you. I need a translation.
There's this about immunity. There's something else that's determining how they get a lot of contact, and that's the same thing. So the number of contacts is the consequence of the
Okay. So, the person went to Harvard, and they let everybody know that. And so everybody wants to be their friend, so there's no contact. And, of course, the supervisor is biased towards the Harvard man. Or some less poor version of that. The person is just really good, they're competent, they're funny, they have all kinds of great qualities, which leads to more contact and also leads to reference power. All right. Reference power. And that's not.
idea that it's kind of a combination of the number of people you know, so the amount of resources that you have, but then also separating that out from the resources that you mobilize as well. So I thought that was really interesting, and I liked that. There, the PC essentially was arguing that
Mandolin is a boy.
he was essentially arguing that if you measure it in terms of like what you actually get out of that, then it's really pathological because you can't measure it without, you can't define it because it's an outcome and then
Sure.
yeah, it's just confusing. So I kind of like his explanation of like the capital kind of being split in that.
Yeah, there's a general feel to network analysis in general that we're dealing with potentialities, we're dealing with structural opportunities, which then may or may not be realized by people they would see. And that keeps it from being chronological. You find everything in terms of the result that you get from having contact with. Okay, I agree. I like that. And I like that whole sequence, and people have developed it further, like the paper by Ned Smith and Tanya Menn in recent times where, let's see, somebody will help me with this. At the narrowest, they have a problem situation. Something comes up. Then there's the set of people, we'll call it the vote set, to use Martin's term. What do you think of? Who comes to mind? Who might be able to help you with this problem? And then among those people that come to mind, you think, no, not Bill. Mary would be good. There is the I thought that they called this the most.
The broadest thing is potential, and then we have activated, and then we have mobilized.
Okay, so I am wrong. Let me start. So the broadest then is the potential. And that is who the person knows. And then there is the activated. And the activated is who they actually think of. In certain situations, certain people come to mind. And then there's the actually mobilized, who is chosen to, who they go to. They go to help. And it's this narrowing set of people that finally provide. And then, after this, they may or may not be successful in getting the money from them or whatever it is that they need.
Interesting, because this theory actually really closely aligns with several communication theories that talk about behavior change. Essentially, they talk about the accessibility of that particular behavior, that knowledge. They talk about the fit. So does it fit the context that you're actually in? And then they think about efficacy, the can you actually do it? So it's interesting to see how this lines up.
And of course, all fields have these basic kinds of, other fields talk about having the capability of doing something and the motivation to do it. Other fields, marketing, when I talk about distribution, is it even around, awareness, you know about it, and then finally some kind of preference, you actually want it. Okay, so all of this is about this kind of set of people that you have available, and the presumption is that the more you have available up here, the better, the bigger this set could be, the bigger this set could be, the better the chance that you can actually accomplish what you need. But what's missing in here, of course, is the strength of the tie. And the strength of the tie, of course, is not so much in how you feel about them, but how they feel about you. You may like them a lot, but if they don't like you that much, they're not going to help you. Okay, so let's go back to the original question.
What are they evaluating and why is sales not their evaluation?
What are they evaluating? Well, they're asked to evaluate every single person under their command and say, how well are they doing? And if they score above a certain amount, those people will get a promotion. similar to NIH, you submit your grant, and they give you a point system, and then points, it'll come out, and it'll give it here, anything that got more than 600 points will be actually given a mark. So they're evaluating the performance. Did I answer that question? So we have found now that contacts, in fact, predict supervised evaluation. We said, well, it could be this social capital kind of thing. They're helping them. They're giving knowledge. The other possibility was it's experience correlation. There's something to which we both know intelligence. Any other possibility? Yeah. Yeah, I like that. So it's almost like ties are a signal of quality to people. And so when somebody's got a lot of ties, you can't just something's going on there.
Because they have high value bracelets, which you want to get a lot of ties. So they become a necessary performer.
That's true. Yeah. So, and in fact, if that pattern occurs quite a bit, that high performers tend to develop a lot of ties, then just like dogs, you will quickly skip you to be sensible. That person's got a lot of ties, they'll find a high performance. Right? Strong possibility. There's also, I don't know where the supervisor gets the information. I mean, maybe the stick is just like the actual performance of different tasks. But maybe even more generally, they're picking up rumors to people. I heard that your guy so-and-so really did a great job experiment. And so having more contact means more ability for things to spread to the supervisor. And you might actually create a model in which the employee having a lot of ties and the supervisor having a lot of ties increases the probability that they will know good things about each other. I don't know, I can't remember. It doesn't say right here, does it? Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. And of course, we can have some very instrumental things. Like, what if a person, we don't count how many top level people the employees have. We count how many of their friends are. Not significant. Hard to say. Yeah, okay. Well, if we, end up going to control such that we get sales significant, then I guess I'd be willing to theorize about it. It could be that sales is, in this company, is a low-level job. They're not the people that go out, they're not the accounting staff that go out and get big accounts. They're just literally making sales on the phone. So maybe that's just a low-level job. Or maybe there's a lot of women in sales. That's a weird.
Those friends who tell the supervisor, these guys are from rules and
Yes, I think that's a very, that's a kind of a modern, like you see that kind of idea appearing in state root in the last 10 years. Where before, the theory tended to be more like this. That, well, the contacts allow you to hear more different things, which then allow you to perform the job better. But now we're looking at more sort of perceptual kinds of things. Yes, very good. Okay. So let's go back to our PowerPoint. They're deciding whether or not to join the class. Even if we don't go, we can still hang out here on the outside and listen. So let's talk about structural holes, which, is there any human being that you personally know in your academic environment that's never heard of structural holes? Probably not. Okay, so this, you can find some people who do. But it's an extremely popular idea. It's almost like social capital itself. It's just something appealing about it. Technically, a structural hole is the lack of a tie between two people who are both attached to a focal person. So first we decide who a focal person is, and then we look at the friends around them and we ask, are those friends connected to each other? And Burt, in 1992, but also in earlier pieces, but this is the big one, argued that there is a structural advantage. It has nothing to do with who you're connected to, but simply how you're connected. The advantage is that if your friends are not connected to each other, good things happen to you.
Bad things could happen if they do that.
Right. Yeah, these are all good ideas. So let's write them down. So what is the advantage of being the one who connects otherwise unconnected others? Consolidate power. Console power. What is that? For them to work with each other, they have to go through so it's almost like, yeah, you're not consolidating, it's like a divide and conquer kind of thing. You're preventing them from doing it, right? So that if you had a person like this, and they're all separate, you can divide and conquer. Like if this is a company, and these are employees, and they're doing separate salary negotiations, pretty easy to make one. Or if he's a supplier, you can make the supplier bid things up because that supplier offers you a little bit more. So, okay, but if these were to actually be separate units of the same company, really one unit, then this effectively turns into the company dealing with the other company that equal power. So, yeah, so the effect of being the one who connects people who are not connected is it avoids their consolidation and enables your divide conquer or creating an option. Options are always powerful. You can do it in almost any kind of setting, whenever any kind of research is mildly scarce, such as the professor's time. People want to see the professor, and the professor says, gosh, I wish I could fit you in, but I can't. Unless you wanted to take out lunch, right? And so you could kind of sort of make it worthwhile, right? So that's an option. You finally give it to the highest bidder. All right, what other possible advantages could there be to the person who connects people who are not connected?
Well, you have one of each type of person, so a lot of the same person.
Oh, so, okay, so here's you, and you are connected to a woman, and here you are connected to a man. Is it that kind of thing?
Well, I mean, so those little never set of form, all three of those people are probably very similar. Instead of being friends with all the same people and having an echo chamber, you have one of each different.
So it might be, especially because of homophily, it might be highly similar. But it could be something more formal. It's like you know somebody over in marketing, and you also know somebody over in finance. And why do you care about that? So what you're assuming then, I mean, just just to clarify, what if the marketing guy and the finance guy were really good buddies? Does you still have the advantage that you know a marketing guy and a finance guy?
They're the one that gives you the information from what, who's like benefit yourself. So, I don't know, I guess that's where it could be.
Well,
So,
clearly, I mean, this is management 780. This is the management guy who is taking advantage, exploiting the financing market. We don't have time with each other. Yeah, okay. See, so from the point of view of information, I don't see any less or more information if this tie is here or if it's not here.
There's not necessarily much more information, but definitely have control over that information and how it's shared among. I think there's different information because they think different ways, therefore they're not connected. Therefore you're going to get a different perspective.
Okay, well, let me just, so it takes years to get a finance PhD. And it takes years to get a marketing PhD. And maybe it even took time before that led them down that path. They become friends and start having coffee every 2 weeks. Are they going to become identical now so that their knowledge is the same? I think they still have, the finance guy is still going to know finance, and the marketing guy is still going to know finance, and then never the twain shall meet. Oh, hold on.
Then why are we studying this if they do rub off on one another?
Yes, well, okay. Because what we're trying to do here is narrow down under what circumstances exactly. Let's try two things. First, since Camila already brought up another mechanism, let's go to that one, then we'll come back to yours. So Camila's mechanism, sounded to me like it was like, well, management guy talks to the marketing guy and learns about how you can, about all the issues of selling securities and how that's different for different situations. And the management guy also talks to the finance guy and learns that there's a whole new kind of security. I don't know, an exchange traded fund that didn't exist before. In fact, it just used to be mutual funds. And having heard the latest in marketing, and maybe even used fMRI, yeah, the management guy says, hey, finance guy, I know how to sell yes, really, really well. That's the technology that I've heard about, fMRI enabled selling. Okay, that's, to me, that's a kind of a brokering, arbitrage, kind of synthesizing. So what the person in the middle is doing is synthesizing info from two separate places. And the big advantage of them not being connected to each other is that if they were, they might have synthesized themselves. Like, we needed the management guy who doesn't even understand it. Yeah. Yeah. Except that, I think at the level of custom conversation, yes. I don't know what brokerage is. I guess I think of brokerage as a specific mechanism, a specific process. Whereas I think that structural hold is a physical structure. And it may be a structure that facilitates brokerage. But one's a process, and one's static, one's a thing. But let's go back to the thing about, well, I had this great situation. My marketing guy and my finance guy didn't know anything about each other. But one day I slip. I make a lunch date with both of them. And so they both show up, hit it off really well, they just start talking. I'm out of here. Well, that could happen. Why not?
The square has to bring something in the table to be valuable, otherwise.
So, in fact, the square might be serial introducers to people. And it might be their talent, in fact, to bring people together that could actually use each other. So, yes, actually, they're not quite needed here. They could actually back off with this. It could be that instead of, like this example, but this is a VC, and this is some tech guy, and it's this person, the broker, who saw that this particular technology guy and that venture capitalist, they could probably make something work. And so there will be a reward for this. It may be monetary, it may be reputational, but there will be a reward.
So why
Brokerage what? Brokerage fee, like literally.
why do these structural holes
Oh, why do they form? Or why don't they fill in?
Yeah, why does that try not happen?
Yes. In fact, Granovetter would say that he called this the forbidden triad.
Is it just measurement?
It's just a matter of time. It's just that eventually this will happen. Granovetter said, look, one of the reasons why ties form is popular, right? This person actually has things in common with this person. And the reason why this tie forms is that this person has things in common with this person. By the laws of transitivity, that should mean that this person has some things in common with this person. So there is an increased likelihood of this happening. Now, Granovetter says, if there's a strong tie here and a strong tie here, then there's an increased likelihood that at least there's a weak tie here. So the broker, so what Bert is saying is that these things are probably temporary situations. They are going to close up. And if you're going to keep making your money off of being a broker, you're going to have to keep moving on and finding new people who have to each other.
But
Okay.
didn't we say something in the beginning of the semester about how like Granovetter wasn't exactly right, but there's another way of thinking about
Yeah,
that?
better.
No, I mean I don't remember, but like because you're thinking about people here, individuals, but like that's also been thought about like in terms of markets. Like in poor nations, you could have that circle on the left be like a rural community, and the black circle be the state.
Mhm.
But the thing is that they're separated by space, right? Distance. Like that could be the capital of a country where the state is, the central government is, right? And then you have the rural community pretty far away. And then in the middle there, you have what they call an intermediary, like a middleman. And these are the
All
people.
good words, broker, middleman.
Yeah, but
intermediary.
they're the ones that basically keep the rural people poor. Because rural people don't have, let's say, a truck that they can use to take their goods to the capital and sell it. Instead, they have to go to the intermediary who charges them, and then they lose all that, the profit they could have made if they had just gone directly to the capital. So it's intermediary that keeps the rurals, well, it's a game between intermediary and the people in the capital that are kind of keeping the rural people out there. So, I mean, they could be introduced, and that's what they're trying to do, is get rid of the intermediary. But actually, the capital, the people in the capital or the government and intermediary like that setup. So,
That's good.
I don't know.
That's very interesting. So,
It
I
could
mean,
be-
here, this
it
is
could
an
be
answer to
deliberate.
Lauren. The answer is, why doesn't a tie form between the regional and capital? The answer is, it's not in the intermediary's interest to let that happen. The intermediary does what it can to keep them away from each other. Although, if they start charging too much for their little services, eventually there's going to be a strong pressure. The regional is going to be like, come on, there's got to be some way I can get to the capital directly, or to a different intermediary at least, something. But this is costing me too much.
One article talks about that a lot, I think, the kind of traditional, like the original conceptualization of the capital is essentially kind of the idea of how the power shifts.
Yes, sort of like at a whole social class level.
And like a class level, they kind of talked about that, and then, of course, Lynn moved it more into an individual node level, but that was originally, I think, how it was conceptualized. But
I wouldn't say Marx introduced the notion of class having an interest, whole classes having a particular interest, and false consciousness being when classes acted against each other, like when people voted Trump.
Yeah, no, he does bring up Marx and the idea of capital.
Yeah, but Bourdieu obviously very much into that idea, and how the rich actually do that. And those studies of Paget, the Medici, are all about how they kept themselves in control of the entire Florence and
But I mean, like, that's a simplification of the situation. I mean, even within the rural, you'll find that there are people that are also maintaining that structure. So intermediary is not there by accident. It's also like,
One thing about that,
It's-
everybody thinks about disintermediation, the direct tie, and it may be that an intermediary is actually the most efficient thing, and what you need is more intermediaries, so there's competition, rather than one that's got a monopoly. Right, because often the direct route, everybody bringing their goods, for example, to market, can be horribly inefficient, because I'm carrying a small amount of stuff, right?
yeah. But it's a very good point, because it may take really quite special talent or physical resources that deal with bridge. It's not in the regional interest to develop those capabilities. It's kind of what would transaction cost. Now this kind of argument. So it just makes sense to have these specialists that know how to speed brokers. They know how to bridge those.
Lauren, your very first point you made about is there an information difference? I can think of one at an episodic level, not in a relational, but at an episodic level, if for example, in an innovation setting, if one person's a general management person or some other kind of non-technical role, and both of those other people perceive themselves as in the technical core of the organization, even though their specialties are very, very different. You put them together in a room with the person, and they'll find the things that they share, the values they share, and they'll change the nature of the conversation, possibly. Whereas when you're with them individually, they tune to you. When you put them in with another specialist, they kind of have to fit that culture. That kind of defends your notion that there might be an information advantage to having those conversations separately.
I think you don't want to be with a group of people that all think the same.
Yeah. So the point that I was going to make about that, we're just not totally wrong on that one.
And you don't want that tie to form, because once that tie forms, you know that you've influenced the marketing person enough that they think like you, and you've influenced the finance person enough to think like you, and so you need to go find some other people that don't think like you, so you can get some new ideas. But also, all of this depends on how we're defining a tie and a node, right?
Yes.
Okay, I just need to make sure.
Yes.
Social network analysis, this all depends on how we're defining the node, how we're defining the
Totally.
tie.
I mean, we like to bring it, and there's value to bring it at the abstract level of nodes and lines. But of course, certain kinds of lines would have no effect in any way like this, and other kinds would.
Because every single person who's giving an answer, I think, has a different interpretation of what the node is and what the tie is.
Yes, that's assuming that the data are even collected by surveys. Yeah. We can collect the data using lots of different methods. It could be co-authorship ties from archival data, or it could be trading between nations, the number of goods that go. It could be just about anything, but you always have to think, does the kind of tie that I'm talking about support the argument that I'm making? Because does the argument I'm making implicitly assume some kind of mechanism such as human agency or intelligence or something? One thing about brokers is that they find they're not very effective when ties are easily formed. Because if I have to go through this node to get to this node, and it's onerous, but I could just as easily make a cold call and introduce myself, I will. I'm going to skip the middleman. But if these are trust ties, I can't just decide that this person over here is going to trust me. I can't call them up on the phone and say, okay, we trust friends now. Right? It doesn't work. But let's go back again, though, to your point, which I like very much. That you've got the broker here, also known, and you've got connected to somebody here who has certain ways of thinking. And then you've got them connected to another way, another person who has another way of thinking. And clearly there's an advantage to having different points of view coming in. But there is this mechanism called contagion, or more generally, social influence, which means that when people interact with each other, they become one with each other. So if we're discussing, as we have this situation right now in the business school, that we don't have a dean, we lost our dean, we need a new dean, we have some dean candidates coming in, and we're all going to be meeting them and discussing them, and each of, and by the way, some of the, I was on the committee that chose the final 6 candidates, and I know that there's a guy from marketing, I know that there's 2 guys from finance, I know that there's a guy from management. It could be that all the management professors want the management guy to win, and the finance people want the finance guy to win, and so on and so forth. There's going to be a lot of interest, there's going to be a lot of jockeying and spreading of information and so on. It's going to be, people have different points of view for various reasons. As they interact with each other, they start coming to agreement. And so the value of being connected to these different people becomes less and less in terms of information. If these 2 people start talking to each other and come to practically have the exact same ideas, we can imagine that we've got a lot of little triangles over here, a lot of little circles over here. They're interconnected with each other, and they're interconnecting now with all the triangles, and pretty much it's groupthink. That's what they do. Then that's not as good as if they had been separated from each other. So I would say that in those kinds of sense-making situations, where there is easy contagion of beliefs, thoughts, ways of doing things, and so on, that it makes a big difference whether your 2 friends are connected versus not connected. Those 2 are going to be really different. Yes?
Mom was talking about the cocoon though for entrepreneurs, like when you're first starting out an entrepreneurial venture, having too many perspectives or almost even an empathy with structural holes, but having a lot of structural holes outside.
It's really problematic. Yeah. So we also need to look at the time. Let me finish this point, come to that one. I just want to say, though, that when you don't have this kind of information flowing, and this kind of mechanism happening, but rather you have something like disciplinary information, like you've got your PhD physicist, and you've got your PhD anthropologist, they can talk every day of their lives, and the anthropologist is never going to understand it. It's just not going to happen. And so you don't lose anything. I'm an anthropologist, I know. And I can remember asking a physicist very recently at a dinner party, what is temperature? And I got this big long answer, and I never did understand. So there's really little danger here of losing anything if you introduce your anthropologist friend to your physicist friend. You'll still get the benefit of diversity. Now the cocoon thing. Well, maybe we should bring up, let's work towards that slowly by asking what are some of the disadvantages of having your friends not be connected to each other. But even before that, I think maybe we should be a little bit more systematic. Suppose we've got our broker and we've got a connection here and here. And this could be a group of people here, and this could be a group of people here. And this is the one boundary status. I said earlier about the sort of synthesis idea. That's one advantage. Another advantage to the broker will call him B here. Actually, the broker. And the broker may realize that this group over here, over in the heavy machinery division, is tackling a problem that has already been solved, has been encountered and solved here over in the small parts division. And this person can just tell these people over here, I've got an idea. You could do this. And it doesn't really matter whether they pretend it's their own idea or whether they say, look, I got it from here. They provide the value by bringing it over, right? So there's a transfer of ready-made solutions. We recognize that this is solved in another field. And this is very common in technical areas. Somebody who's working in chemistry, in fact, I think that chemists 15 years ago discovered network analysis in vacuum. Because it turns out that the graphite concepts like cleats have predictable effects on molecules, how molecules behave. So if you can take the heat structure of a molecule, then things that happen. So they can just grab directives from graphite analysis and know that they know what the results are already and apply them immediately to chemistry. So there's a transfer solution. There's also the analogy, analogous solution. So in a situation where they're dealing with a problem, these people are dealing with not the same problem, some other kind of problem. But there's enough commonality that the things, the steps that they took over here to deal with that problem might be modifiable to deal with this problem over here. So there's a kind of, there is some value to transferring that. Those are analogous pieces. And again, that's going to be key to value. There was one more that I was thinking. I just left you. Yes, and that should be really phrased much more generally. Talk to that, absolutely. There's got to be a database. There have been so many cases where people are trying all the same things that don't work that every other company has done. And if they only knew about those, it would save them a ton of time. That's probably got to be more valuable, in fact, than the present solution because there's more data on things that don't work. Good idea. There's one more of these, and I just can't think of what it is. But now let's switch then to what are the disadvantages of that kind of situation. What are the disadvantages of having contact with people who are not connected to each other?
A lot of time and energy for you to be the broker or the builder team. So that takes up a lot of work, potential, like time resources and energy resources.
Yeah, it seems like it's could be a very active role that where you're maintaining relationships all the time. I don't know if anybody's ever read the business case, Heidi Roizen. But if you run into it, it's very interesting. And it's super interesting from a lot of points of view because she's a real person and that's her real name. And then somebody wrote up her case and then she became famous for being the Heidi Roizen case. She graduated from Stanford. Stanford constantly brings her back. And she'll go to a business class where they've just done her case. And then they're asking her questions about it. And she has these great stories to tell of like people who are currently like doing her case in some like maybe at MIT, and they get the bright idea of just looking her up on the net and texting her. They find her text them and they text her and they say, when you were in this situation, what were you thinking? And she answers, and then they raise their hands in their class and they say, I just talked to Heidi Rose. She says it's a real thing. That's a really interesting life that she lived as a result of all this. But anyway, she's a well-known broker. She's very active. But let's also remember that some aspects of the benefits of structural holes are completely passive, right? If this person thinks very differently from this person, and it's just idle conversation, this person receives all that diversity of information, it's going to have a beneficial effect, and doesn't have to work for it. So let's not always imagine that it's exhausting.
This reminds me of Camella's work. Yeah. So depending on how you define a node, depending on how you define the tide.
Okay.
You
Conditional
might,
and all that.
conditional and all that, you might feel like you don't have a support network.
Yeah. Lack of support, really.
Yeah, everyone from you to help.
That's true too, yeah.
So you can set
I mean, I don't know which direction these tides are going. I don't know if the tides meet. Maybe they're going in both directions. Maybe the ones on the right are the ones that come to you with their problems. Maybe the ones on the left are the ones that you go to with your problems. I don't know.
I found something about
I don't believe it. All that study we found something.
with this factors, business, investment, network. The incoming side has effective, yeah, effective, no effective side has the other one.
Oh, okay, constraint?
Not constraint, no, effective,
Effective size, okay.
effective side, and then creating extortion, even controlling for sex, department, and other stuff.
Uh-huh.
That's so cool. So this, what you were saying, what I was saying about the extortion that it implies having people that are incoming side. People that depend on you to develop their own work.
So if you have this situation where people are coming to you for advice, direction, all kinds of stuff, for inputs to their work, this is exhausting.
I would say if they were in the stage when the times are ongoing, there'd be higher chance that those, I don't know if it makes connections between each other.
Huh. I was just about to say, what does this have to do with the ties among the altars? So, what does this mean?
So if it's the same person asking or connecting to different people, there is, I think there is a higher chance that they have something in common.
Yeah.
So they intersect,
Yeah.
the commonalities intersect.
Yeah. So you're not saying necessarily causally, but if A is asking B for advice on surgical matters, and is also asking C for advice on surgical matters, probably because they're both surgeons and they're kind of similar, and they probably have a tie with each other. So that situation is probably more common. But you're not necessarily saying that just because ego asks both of them, that's going to cause a tie between you. Although I could see it happening, like say within a department, graduate student asks Professor A something, asks Professor C something, and Professor A and C say, did you get the same odd question from that graduate student? What's going on there? But what about here? Yeah, or interesting idea. Sorry. Actually, you don't say that. You keep that one for yourself. So here, in Camila's result, would it have made any difference to this person's exhaustion level if these people were going to each other as well and had all kinds of ties among them? You think so? In this case.
If the other people know each other, you can delegate more easily. To a certain amount of that are less good.
Yeah. So if a line means I need you, I need you to do something or something like that. But they're not just depending only on you. They're also depending on that person, also depending on how it spreads the load. And this person is not quite so hemmed in, and in fact could possibly begin to understand the pattern and say, listen, I can help you with your problem. If you can get so-and-so to help this person with that, and they can start to make a community that kind of works. I could see that. It could dilute that.
But they didn't have to say then people will organize without.
Yes, I see. Right. show you a slide about that in a moment. That's kind of cute. Let me just build on the lack of support business here. So if these are some kind of warm and fuzzy ties, and they're all connected to each other, what does that do? These are all friendship ties, let's say. What does that do for this person, as opposed to the person who's friends and not friends with each other? Yeah. So suppose the ties are friendship ties. Then what's the difference for ego to have the friends be all connected and be friends with each other versus their friends being completely unconnected? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's some extra value to being part of a team, a family, a community, or something that this just does not provide. And of course, again, these people may not hang out with each other, but they're probably aware of each other, they're probably jealous of each other, and there could be all kinds of stuff that goes on. And especially if the pattern happens to be something like this. You know, it's like these three against these three, and pushing and pulling. Why are you hanging out with the geeks? Well, I like geek stuff. Well, why are you hanging out with the debutantes? Well, I like that too.
Because the ego on the left will have more social capital than the one on the ego on the right.
Ah, really? So, structural whole is the theory of social capital. It is very clear that the absence of ties among the friends is more social capital. So the one on the right has more social capital than the one on the left.
That just seems so messed up.
It's
like that's
right.
I don't know if this is right off, but the one on the right is more like friends of mine who are guys. That's what their tie structure looks like as opposed to one on the left. Girls seem to be more guys have their like I do. It's weird if I ever got my friends together. You got your poker friends, you got your golf friends, you got your basketball friends, and you have the people you live with.
Right.
They're all separate communities.
You've got high school friends, and you've got other friends, you've got work friends, and putting them together would just be messy. However, there's also a stereotype that says that women's groups like this are quite complicated. And each of them is talking about the other, about the third, and it actually requires, this is why women have such big brains, is because they have to sort out all of this stuff. Not true, okay. It's a
Yeah,
stereotype.
if we're bringing gender into this too, so you said controlling for gender, that still exists. So there's a branch of literature that says women are going to get more of those incoming ties where people ask a lot of them. But no, so your research is still, like, that's completely sound. I'm not disagreeing with it. I'm saying, so you can also say, and you can also say women are getting more of these ties, and this is the effect that it has.
So it might be that actually if you control for, so suppose women have more burnout. If you control for the number of incoming ties,
Yeah,
maybe.
that's what I'm saying. So her research is showing that.
Yeah, okay.
This is interesting because, like, in the geography literature, when we read on social capital, we don't talk about specific structures having more social capital than some other structure. It's just talked about in terms of, do you have the right number of ties for the particular situation that you need to have the social capital
Kind
for?
of a fit concept.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're trying to do, like, I guess that's a quantitative approach to understanding social capital, but then if that has more, if that circle there, the red one has more social capital than the one on the left, I don't know, it just makes it's strange because you have so many different situations in which
Right.
social capital can just differ. You can't really say this is got
I
social-
agree with that, and I think that the literature backs you up with that. There are many contingencies, and that this kind of structure is good sometimes, and this kind of structure is good for other things. So what we're doing right now in this class is just kind of outlining all the ways in which this structure is good, and all the ways in which the other structure is bad, or vice versa. So one other difference here that we haven't quite brought out about the difference here between right ego and left ego in this lead, that one. what else is going to be different for that for the two egos? The one on the left has the. So, because in fact they're coordinating with each other. So if they all, if Sally, so if Sally does something mean to Jill, and of course everybody else knows about it, they can decide to ostracize Sally. If Sally does something mean to Jill here, nobody else even knows about it. Doesn't really change anything. All they did was to lose Jill. This one has a much more complicated consequences. Also, maybe much more rich in its positive potential. Right. What about in terms of their behavior? I mean, is Sally free to completely change her look? Here, there's going to be a lot of opinions, and those opinions are going to be discussed with each other. Here, there's a lot of autonomy because, in fact, they don't even see each other together. So Sally could wear Western clothing. I don't know, a leather skirt with boots and
The bolo tie.
bolo tie and all that kind of stuff. When she goes out to the movies with this person, but she looks completely different, like she's wearing a Sicilian over here. Right? And there's no dissonance that's created by that. Because she has, and so this structure is associated with autonomy. And this structure is associated with the opposite of autonomy. This is a highly embedded structure. And it is associated with strength. Now those words have loaded connotations. We like autonomy, constraint, that. But not always. So this will be the final thing before we take a break. Famously, Bert said, social capital is this kind of structure. That's what's good for you. And Coleman, who used the word social capital long before Bert did, said this is the social structure that is associated with social capital. This is the definition.
And then there's somebody who says it's something in the middle.
Okay. And by the way, it's kind of interesting. Again, it's on the recording. Well, Coleman was Bert's advisor. Bert is Coleman's academic student and academic son, and rebelled against his father.
That's a little
Coleman gives a famous example. The example is a child. Child is ego. And the people around them are other children, but also are teachers and the child's own parents, but there's also other parents and neighborhood adults and so on. And Coleman argues that the child that is in this situation where the parents are talking to the teachers and the neighbors are keeping a watch on the kids who are playing in the street.
Is this Coleman from the 60s?
Yeah,
Okay.
still a lot left.
Yeah, but like, okay, yeah.
Big Coleman, yeah.
Big Coleman.
James. Close friends call him JC. Right, Coleman. So he says, look, that kid is going to be better off because of all these people coordinating their actions together for the well-being of that child. And then Bert comes along and says, no, I'm interested in studying managers. And this manager is way better with this kind of thing because they can play people off of each other, they can bring value from this person to this person and benefit from it, they can synthesize ideas and more numbers, and all of these different advantages. I just want you to point out that there's actually no contradiction. It is the exact same argument. Both players agree that a closed structure adult manager, autonomy is a useful thing. And in the case of a child, constraint is a more useful thing. It's the same argument. So don't get caught saying, there's two schools of thought. They're not, there's one school of thought. One method.
But why? Because like the tile structure, couldn't that be a manager? I mean, not every manager can operate in every different.
That's true. And so after the poll, after the break, we'll talk about, like, well, under what conditions would this be the right kind of thing for a manager? Unfortunately, the answer is going to be the kind of answer that would drive the feminists wild. Because I'm going to say, it was good for children, good for women too. Women and children. Oh, you had the photograph. Okay, let's take a break.
I was saying,
There's a theory of embedded autonomy.
there is a
Embedded autonomy.
Yeah,
That's really,
the relationship the state has to have with people is one that's embedded. So I don't know what it would look like in terms of picture, maybe more like that.
well, there's also,
More connected, but not fully connected like that one, because what ends up happening is the state, the Constitution can't do its work. It's too embedded, but it also can't do its work. It's
Yeah.
too autonomous.
yeah, that literature exists in management as well, where it's called network organization. The idea is that it's a hybrid between the pure market economy, where everybody is just buying and selling from each other, versus a company that is vertically integrated and simply buys all of its suppliers. Somewhere in between is a set of organizations that are in kind of co-opetition. They compete a bit, but they also collaborate, and they're loosely coupled with each other.
And what I like, one of the things that I like most is that I can do because I can hope for that. And I thought that it would make it drop completely. I said, okay, because all you need to say is that it's not the concept. I think that people who are listening to this are going to what the it's been
I think it really comes down to what are your dependent variables in the hypothesis? Are they about individuals or are they about firms? In which case,
like we're expected to do more things, and so we don't perform on all these things that aren't even our job. You get that evaluation that get feedback about their effort and also about themselves as people, versus then get more feedback about their effort and also like how they actually perform and what they're doing on the job. And so they get more information on how to get ahead that way, whereas we get more information on how to get up as well.
Yes, that's what I'm reading. Am I ready for it? Is that what you asked? What did you ask?
not necessarily, no.
It's how to,
Not if they
it's
did
how
it
to
the normal
understand.
way. There is a
It's
way
the
of
last
doing it.
one.
So, the reason I studied this
But
was
I think I'm ready for it.
I had a performance evaluation and my feedback was I'm too assertive as a manager. Yeah, you just do my
You
student
know,
evaluation.
in the management literature. you can
And a
use
formal
the-
letter that I
now,
got. I was like, I don't know what you want me to do with that.
Everybody's like,
Yeah.
no,
I
that
was
just
like,
doesn't
so
work.
what do you need? And he was
Because the
like,
differences
well,
between the people make a
some of the other men in the
difference. And
organization.
two firms can have the exact same average. One of them is like everybody's the same, but the other one is like two opposites.
They're like, how much to do? And I was like,
When
makes sense.
But that's my job.
Yeah, like, I knew the
And doesn't it kill you, like, when you make a mistake, it's not,
oh, just
do it again,
Yes.
or better, it's like, you're
You
fundamentally.
can try that. Good luck.
oh no, I'm telling you, it will work.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, because I was wondering, I don't know if it works very similar here, because it sounded like, at least on their campus, like, you couldn't put, like, I don't know if they were doors open for people, it almost sounds like when you went places, every person had to swipe in no matter what, whereas like here, you know, one person could swipe in and then like 4 people could walk
Yeah,
in.
I think of it, I haven't been on that campus in years, but I would think of it more as it's an exact thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Because,
yeah, no, that'd be
because
really
it's not just
interesting.
I think it wasn't just door swipe, like if you buy stuff, I think it's any use of the card.
Yeah,
And so if
exactly.
you and I both go to the same place, there's a real high chance we're both going to swipe the card. I don't know, it just looked interesting.
Yeah, it was an interesting way to use that type of data, for sure.
Well, because the interesting thing is, it's free data, so it's just a matter of figuring out how to manage it. Whereas a lot of the other tools that provosts use are not free, they cost faculty a lot of time.
It'd be interesting if you could combine that with like, I know at the dorms, like when I used to live in the dorm, every time you had someone visit, you had to like have them physically sign in. And so if you can, I wonder if you combine the swipes with like the actual sign-in data and be like, are they just living in the same dorm or like did this person come and see this other person? I mean, that would be interesting. So, yeah.
It just, what you were working on, were the issues of.
Yeah, socialization.
I have you scheduled. Okay, that's fine. But if you need to move it, that's fine too. Okay.
I think that is true in several fields.
Yeah, we're told, if you're a woman, do not study business.
Or at least have some other stuff that is important and very different.
Even though natural it's very important.
So,
But that can be way too intense.
right. Let's look at some of these. We've actually outlined many more potential benefits and disadvantages of having structural holes. But the classic ones from '92 were the autonomy, control, and information benefits. And so I'll just cover those briefly. The autonomy ones, we talked about it already in terms of the woman wearing the bolo. This is the guy in the bar who is chatting up all these different women, and he tells one he's a pilot, and the other one he's a cowboy, and the other one he's a doctor, or whatever. And as long as they don't compare notes, he's okay, right? But if they're connected to each other, that would be a problem. So clearly, there's more freedom of action, and there's more fluidity of identity if your friends are not well connected. So, and that could be of interest, particularly for stigmatized identities and things like that. You might expect that their networks would be more open because it enables more fluidity of identity. Then we've also talked about control benefits, and I think it was Julia that was bringing up a case that I find nicely illustrated by these data. These are real data from the Carter presidency that were declassified, and it's from the White House diaries, the calendars where they say who met with whom. And for year one, if you look at the pattern of who's meeting with whom involving the president, all of the advisors, the cabinet people, are all meeting individually with the president, with very few exceptions. This is the big dude Brzezinski here, and Cyrus Vance. Those are the only two names I can remember. And there are advantages to this, but also, the person's running a country. Now, for Chinese, maybe this won't seem so startling, but to Americans, it's like the concept that one mind, one entity would somehow be able to run an entire country seems like impossible. And so, actually President Carter, he was a PhD in nuclear physics, so he's a pretty smart guy. But if you look at his pattern in year 4, he gives up the ghost and says, come on, we need to have everybody meeting together in order to solve some of the problems. This was the years of the Iran hostage crisis and massive inflation and so on. The one on the left meant that he had a lot of power because when he discussed matters of state, he would do it with this person. When he discussed matters of housing, it was with this person, and none of the advisors knew the whole picture. Only he knew the whole picture. Great if he could put the whole picture in his head, bad if he can't. Over here, he's really making more use of his cabinet. They can all work together to help him. At the same time, they can actually, there's more of them than him. And they can all collude and basically to say, this is what we're going to tell Jimmy, and that's it. He has no power. An interesting thing he does, it may be accidental, but he maintains a few advisors separate. And it would be really interesting if these advisors are some of the ones that he had brought with him from the very beginning, like from the campaign trail and stuff, who are from his home state and are people that he has long-term trust with and wants to keep as a kind of alternative to the White House, to all of the professional politician types. But anyway, clearly, advantages of if you trust your advisors, you probably want this kind of situation for the most part. But if you don't, you want to keep them separate from each other. I think that's the point that Julia was making. Yeah, or he felt like there was no other way. He was kind of forced into it. Overloaded, you think? Yeah. Right, and the problem started mounting, became too big. It's often fairly easy to run something when everything's going well. When things going badly, you need to put in a little more energy. Okay, so this slide covers stuff that we talked about already. It's the business about being able to synergize across two groups, or see an analogy, or just bring in something that the other group has already solved as the best practice. So these are different ways of providing value by being a broker across holes. Bert is not someone to claim that structural holes is absolutely essential in all jobs, in all situations. So it takes a while to unpack this picture, but first let's look at the main scatter plot. The x-axis is structural holes, but it's measured backwards. So the bigger the number, the fewer the structural holes. This is his measure of constraint. Okay, and you can see the little diagrams. Towards the left is that kind of a structure, to the right is this kind of structure. And up here we've got performance as evaluated by supervisors, and you can see that there is a negative relationship. As the managers' networks get more closed, their performance goes down on average. Now, he does a lot of regressions in which he's trying to predict performance as a function of multiple variables, including structural holes. And in some, structural holes accounts for virtually all of the variance in performance, but not in all. So here, let's look at this first pie chart. Brokerage contributes slightly more than half of predicted variance in performance differences between managers. Network constraint, white. Job rank, red, and other factors, striped. First pie is investment banker compensation and an analyst election to All-America research team. So that's his dependent variable, is his compound variable here of banker success. And what he's saying is that network structural holes is a big predictor of their success using compensation and election to this All-America research team. The second pie is a different kind of organization. It's a supply chain and HR management compensation. Let's see, supply chain and HR management compensation. Oh, okay. So it's a supply chain company, and we're predicting HR manager compensation, and it's a very bureaucratic company. And here, red explains almost all of performance. So it's like, 20%, 80%, 81% is explained by your existing rank. And only 10% is accounted for by structural holes. It's the kind of work situation where you don't have maneuverability, and where playing the game and making use of knowledge before it's widely spread just doesn't help you that much. And then finally, we have here, third pie is early promotion to senior job in a large electronics firm. This is actually at Raytheon, and it's another example where structural holes makes a huge difference. And job rank is almost nothing. It's all about some other human capital factors and then the social capital factors. And this is the company where he went in and instituted a program where all top managers got training in network analysis. And initially, they did these control groups and network groups, and then let them perform. And they found that 5 years down the line, that the ones that had the network training were more successful. They understood that what was going on around them in network terms, and understood how to play that game.
I have to mention something. We did an intervention in a very bureaucratic large company, and taught people how to kind of bridge, how to create relationships across functions. The star pupil was a transfer into that firm from Raytheon.
Oh, really?
He saved his company by doing the assignments we gave him. He found an error in pricing that was costing him $2 million a year in revenue. And this is in a few days of work that he did this, and it was not a given mistake. It was a class of mistakes that was being made over and over again. The first entity, a case of which was $2 million. But he culturally just really, when we started teaching people about, because culturally it was there. And interestingly, about 3 years later, he left the bureaucratic company and went back to Raytheon. Because although he was a superstar there, the culture was just so, why are you asking that? And he loves the Raytheon culture.
That's a wonderful example. Yeah. Have you written that up anywhere? Be great to have that. This one is the one that we just talked about, the Raytheon thing. That is written up by Bert, so it's useful for giving to managers, trying to convince them of the value of network analysis. This is his study on good ideas. So the other classic outcome of structural holes is supposed to be creativity, innovation, good ideas. So he does this study in which they do this kind of little experiment, and they solicit innovations from all the employees in the company. And they put them into a box, and then these innovations are, how do you call it, graded by a set of judges. And they see what that has to do with characteristics of the person, controlling for where they are in the organization and their gender and all kinds of things like that. And if you look on the left here, what you see is, again, the classic negative curve. As the network gets more constrained, more closed, you see that the evaluation of their innovation, of their ideas' value, goes down. So people with closed networks have bad ideas. That's what this is saying, bad, innovative ideas. Over here on the right is a little bit more detail on that. Let's see now. So there were some ideas that were simply dismissed. Like they didn't even really consider them because they were so weirdly written or so insular or so just bizarre that they just weren't worth studying. If you notice that curve, that's this curve here, goes up with increasing closure. So the more closed your network, the more likely you have just useless ideas that they won't even think about. And then that's also true. I think the no idea here one was the one that where they just didn't even know what the person was saying. And so if you live in a very closed world, you've never left your hometown or whatever, you just have some strange ideas, And so the risk of having really poor ideas increases with the closeness of your network. Let me see now. We've seen that. So obviously we're going in the right direction. It takes a while to catch that. Gender. So, in general, we see that increasing constraint means reduction in performance. And here's kind of the typical curve. Actually, this is just senior men here. And we've got a pretty strong R here, very significant high T value. But when you break it down and look at women and junior men, the value of structural holes doesn't seem nearly as strong. In fact, it actually goes the other way around. That for women, it seems beneficial to have closed networks. That's been found once, it's been found several times. There's at least 6 replications that I'm familiar with that show that result. What would you say is behind it? Why does that happen?
As far as what was controlled for, about 6 different studies considered controlled for lots of different things.
One of the worst things you can do is control for occupation.
Yes. I think all of these are studies that are conducted within the same organization, people that are doing the same things, that all in time.
Using
That has its own problem. It's just generalizability. So like this might be Raytheon. Is it that women are
No, people are going to steal their ideas. I mean, if you don't have to go back and look, they're going to steal your ideas. Same thing with junior
So basically, you need a support group around you. You need a team. It's going to work together to make sure, and it's not just you and the idea, it's when you go to implement it, are people going to be actively helping you, or are they going to be quietly sabotaging it, or just not really caring and helping out? So that might be part of it. And that's especially, studies show, especially true on the implementation side, it's very helpful to have a team. That while innovation comes from having unconnected friends, the successful implementation of innovation helps. It's better to have it more close.
Also, does it easier to everyone have a lot of confidence going into it? So,
Not a lot of confidence, and people will steal. All of that adds up to a kind of a lack of sort of legitimacy and power. Yeah. That it turns out that if you are going to play this game of connecting unconnected players, a very sort of solitary game here, that it helps if you are already seen as a legitimate player. But if you're not, look at what might happen. Suppose you have this situation. So this person here is a member of two groups. And this person brings ideas from this group over to this group. But it's weird for this group that this person is a member of that group. It's like, are you with us or are you with them? There's a, and being like this, people look at you and you're like a loner. You're an unknown quantity. It helps if you already have some characteristics built into you, such as being white, Harvard educated,
Male.
standing in the field, male. Did I put in age? You're not 22 years old. All these different things, right? Tall. Yes, tall. This is the shortest person in the room.
In the closed network for women, is there homophily of men around them, or is there diversity within that group?
Well, we know from Ibarra's studies that there is a tendency for women to surround themselves with women, and this does them no good at all, because women are already lower in the organization. It's more helpful to be heterosis, because at least it's men who are higher in the organization. So, but independent of that, controlling for that, it's still the case that the closed network seems to work better than the open network. Now, Bert has that answer in one of them, the matter of legitimacy, and that's why it works not only for women, but it also explains your men. So that's kind of a nice check on this idea.
The closed network is hard to achieve for women. I mean, it depends, I guess, what organization you're talking about, but there tends to be more men than women in like top level executive positions anyways. So are we talking about like a middle level where there's enough women to, I don't know, come together and work together? What, I guess I'm trying to say is what level are we looking at?
Well, these studies will have people at all levels. Obviously, we're looking at attracting senior and junior men. There'll be senior and junior women, although there'll be a lot more junior women. I don't know that any study's been done, say, in a large hospital among older nurses. That would be very interesting.
Like Google, for example, has been criticized for not treating women equally as men. So I'm just wondering whether they're able to,
Right.
the women are able to network.
Right. I think that would be a case where we expect that, in fact, kind of needs a support network. Bert's got another idea, though. And it's not just about sort of built-in legitimacy and cultural fundamentals, but something, well, kind of a more specific mechanism. Actually, I have the slide if I'm right.
Say that again? The one on Punch? Oh. Yeah, although it's true. I'm always interested in how that happens. I mean, it's true for all kinds of individuals too. I had often had run into it in exactly the opposite, in that people attribute good ideas to me. Jay does this to me, as Steve said, like, I actually didn't say that. But I'll take advantage of it. So let's look at these kinds of canonical structures here. You have on the left one that is a BERT-approved, low constraint kind of network, high structural holes. You've got a bow tie structure here, which is another way of having quite a bit of structural holes, but not as many as the one on the left. If you notice, the constraint score is higher, so that means less structural holes. But still, the people on the right are not connected to the people on the left. There's the clique structure, which has the most constraint here, and which only Coleman would love. And then he's got what he calls the partner structure. And the partner structure is something that we see in successful businesswomen. And it's where there's you, and you have lots of connections that are very important. And you also have this person in your network that is connected to all the same people you are. And that actually creates a lot of constraint. That adds a lot of ties among your alters, so that your constraint level is quite high. It's almost as high as the clique over here. But this one is beneficial and this one is not. And what the difference is, and accounts for some of the results that have been seen, is that in the partner network, person number 2 is your sponsor, is your mentor. And they're the ones who are introducing you around and vouching for you and saying that this person's okay. And so your network looks kind of, doesn't look like the broker network. It looks too tied, but it's a special kind of tying that is actually a beneficial kind of thing. And it's particularly important for people who don't have their own legitimacy. Now, later on, a senior woman could be that number 2 for a junior woman. But so this explains why the overall kind of course results of having high constraint seems to be good for women. It's actually 2 separate kinds of constraint. When you separate them, it turns out that the clique kind is actually not good, just as it is for men. Yeah. I don't think that's actually been studied. I was just saying, I would think that would be logical, but I would love to know if that's been done. One other thing that I wanted to point out is that in case we're going down the stereotypical line of women just prefer to have, they need to have that support structure around them. They're just not tough like men. It turns out that in most studies we find that the networks look about the same for men and women. So here's high-ranking men, and here's women, and actually ranked men. And we have the broker network, we've got the clique network, and the partner network, which is this one here. And it looks like the proportions for high-ranking men are about the same as the proportions for the women. Men and women are creating the same networks around them, but they have different consequences for them. Yes. Yes. And Jyoti cannot take any more of this. She's just like,
I got a TA.
ciao. All right. One other thing that I wanted to mention. Let's check the time. Yes, just in time. In Bert's latest writings, about structural holes. He has a new mechanism that he prefers. So the first mechanism that everybody talked about endlessly was autonomy and control. Those kind of go together. Right? So there was autonomy, control, divide and conquer, those kinds of arguments, power. And then there was the information benefit. So, being connected to different groups of people gives you different kinds of information. And that's good for you. More recently, George's argument is that your social capital of structural wholes aids your human capital, which in turn leads to performance. And what it does is that people, brokers, who are often in those situations, being between people who are not connected, develop skills of analogy and metaphor for seeing and communicating across diverse ways of thinking and behaving. Network advantages point less for who you know than for who you become as a result of being self-sufficient. So in other words, he's saying, by having these open networks, you become cosmopolitan, which goes to lots of different perspectives. You also become used to getting things done between people that talk like this and people that think like that. You become experienced with that, and that's what's necessary at work, especially in a multinational world, in a global world where you have to connect lots of different technologies and people. You become better at doing that, so you become better at doing your job. So it's becoming less and less of an actual network argument. It's becoming more and more an argument of the proximal cause of your performance is your skills. And he's just saying, but the skills are coming from, in part, from being in these situations that are structurally look like this. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? It's kind of surprising that he would do that. I think there'll come a point in the end where they'll say network's got nothing to do with it. I don't know.
Then he retires pretty much.
Yeah, that could be it. Yeah.
Like, okay, I've done my work.
All right. So I think what I'll do is I'll leave for later the math, and I will and we'll also leave for later the actual running of the measures. I'll just do this one little story, and then we'll leave. So I may change the schedule for tomorrow, for next week. Oh, by the way, and in case I do forget, so it's this Friday that Ed is speaking in a colloquium. Okay.
Maybe something for everyone.
Good. Yes, I like cookies.
No cookies.
Oh, no.
Stalking,
This,
so his primary research interests
You
involve
should.
assessment, interpersonal harm, jealousy, conflict, threat, coercion, violence, and stalking. So he's going to talk about this tomorrow down in room 199 at 5 o'clock. First come, first served.
feel free to email that to me or to the whole class, and I'll distribute it. By the way, that kind of gets at Lauren's question about we got to keep in mind what the ties are. Stocking ties, structural holes may not be good for stocking. We don't know. And you were going to plug something.
Oh yeah, there's also an econ this week too. Friday, Dustin Wolford is coming. If you walk by one of the screens in Gatton, you wait a little while, he'll pop up and have a little description.
Okay.
There's another event.
On Friday?
Well, geez.
Sorry, Ed, there will be nobody there.
However, there will be no stalking, no jealousy, no violence in this presentation.
Yeah.
Justin Wolfers declares it's fear o'clock every Friday. Yeah.
All right, let me just tell you the story, and we can go. So this is from a little study that I did. I was a professor at BC, and Rob Cross was a manager at a local consulting company. And he took my network class, and then he got the idea of doing a network analysis on his company. And there was an issue that was going on, which was that they were all doing knowledge management, which is very popular in those days, in the late 1990s. And they had put together this new unit. It was a virtual unit from the best knowledge management people throughout the world for this company. And it was supposed to really be great, but it didn't really work out. They weren't doing any great sales or anything like that. And part of the idea was that they were going to be offering integrated solutions. Knowledge management has sort of two components. It has the people side, which is like getting people to be psychologically willing to share information with competitors and to take the back seat on a project, even though so that the other person is going to do better and so on. And then there's the technological side of like, a lot of knowledge gets wasted in companies because nobody knows that the person sitting next to you actually really knows a lot about petroleum and could solve this problem. Instead, they go out and hire a consultant for it. So that side is kind of a more technological solution where they create databases that put in everybody's knowledge, and then you could search the company database for who knows about petroleum and butter or something. And so it turned out that after some time of this group working, they were not selling particularly well, and they were not selling integrated solutions. So the new leader, Sam Israelit here, asked Rob if he would do this network analysis thing. And so we did this network, and this is kind of information flow. It's like, who do you talk to about stuff? And you could see that it has a bow tie structure. And it's very clear when you look at the names of the people that these were the techie types. And up here were the touchy-feely types who were changing the culture of the organization in order to share more. And they weren't really talking to each other. Now, the star of the group was this guy, EV. These are all initials. Sorry? The bridge, exactly. I was afraid that I have actually shown you this before. No? Good. Okay. So EV has one special quality, which is that when he delivers a project to a client, he includes an integrated solution that has both the cultural side and the technological side. He's got both of those skills. He's also connected to people on both sides and getting information from them. And when people over here, say PB has a project where the client says, I want to do some relationship building and all this kind of stuff, he says to EV, is there someone over in the other group over there that could help? And EV says, oh, don't worry about it. I can do that for you. I've got that skill. And the same thing happens when the cultural guys need some tech. They know EV. They don't know these people. So they bring EV in the project. He gets to be better and better at his job, busier and busier, and also becomes a bottleneck. And so things really start slowing down because everybody's depending on EV. So what we did is we did this diagram, we brought everybody together virtually, and we put a picture in front of them with their actual names on it and just basically said, discuss. And instantly, they look at the picture and they see what's going on, right? It's like you've known it all along, you just didn't have words to it. We've been divided here, and EV is in the center, and he's this like bottleneck. So within like an hour of discussion, they come up with a plan. And by the way, that's one of the really effective things about networks is that there's something about the visual and having your name on things that helps to give will to making change. In most projects, everybody knows what needs to be done. They just don't have the will to do it. But the network diagram helps to give that motivation. And so they created these new internal projects, not client projects, but internal ones that were cross-staffed with people from both halves. So they wrote white papers and they created some databases about what projects had they done and what did they do for the client so that everybody would know a little bit about what everybody else had been providing clients. They created cross-selling goals where you had to sell projects that involved members of both teams, both sub-teams. They made sure that everybody knew what everybody else was doing, project tracking, every weekly email updates, and they made a personnel change. And you can guess what it was. They promoted EV out of the group. and then they actually hired another guy whose initials were EV. So it's unfortunate when you should never label people by their initials. It just really ruins the story. This is a different guy. But 9 months later, we went in and looked at the network. It's completely integrated. Okay? This is the network consulting success story that I use with MBAs. Yes, he got promoted upwards. Yeah, because he was a star. Yeah. Don't think so. And there were a lot of things that we did afterwards where we tried to interview these people. One of the main things that we wanted to know was, are you actually more successful? What is the difference in sales and in profits and so on? Just could not get that out of them for some reason. But because we really want this story to go, look at the network, and that's associated with better sales. Didn't know that. The other thing is that we never did find out from EV whether he understood his position, how he was playing it. But we do know that what he never did, he never said to RC, why don't you and I have lunch? And you know what? I'm going to bring KA, and you guys can talk and, get to know each other. He didn't do that. We know that because we talked to the other people about it. So this is a case where I think of it as sort of local gain for EV and global pain. That kind of entrepreneurial behavior, that kind of structural holes behavior was really good for EV, but it wasn't good for the group as a whole. Right, okay, let's go. Tomorrow, next week we'll actually run structural holes. Which at this point gets pretty trivial because, you go to the menu and it says structural holes and you press the button and out it comes.